The Athletic.
Away, 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 away. Hello! Exciting time.
Exciting
From the
for
Rookery
you,
End.
maybe, not with me trying to drive with that racket going on.
Yes, welcome to From the Rookery End, a podcast brought to you by The Athletic. It's about a life following Watford Football Club, and well, we're following Watford Football Club away for the first time in over 550 days. My name is Jon. With me in the car as we drive down the M23 is Michael.
Hello, Jon.
And in the back is Arlo.
Hello.
He's on his phone and being beautifully quiet. It's an away game, Michael. It's been a long time. And I love away games for many reasons. One, it can make a loss not seem so bad, and a win even better than it would at home. I don't know if it's because I've made this commitment of my time to travel somewhere. We've had a good time in the car now, having a chat about the world and putting it all to rights. Hopefully by the time we get to Brighton, that will all be sorted. But the away game experience for me is always a good one. I can always find the good in it.
Absolutely. Away days are just different, aren't they? I always wake up excited on a match day, but when you know you're going to an away ground and you've got that possibility that 500, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 of you is going to nick into that ground, pinch the 3 points and head back home, no matter how many miles it is it's such a tantalising prospect. But similarly, like you say, Jon, I think it's the adventure, isn't it, that means that if you do lose, it's not disastrous. I guess the exception is if you're playing our friends up the M1. But yeah, it's just kind of got nothing to lose if you do it properly. If you're with your mates, the away fans are always noisier, and there's always, like I said, that tantalising prospect of pinching 3 points. And for me in particular, I was incredibly lucky to be at all Watford's home games last season. But yeah, I haven't been to an away game for, I think it's 570, was it? We said it was. Yeah. Villa away was my last away game. So for me to have all these feelings come flooding back, which I guess other people had last week for the football, and an away game means I'm not working, so I can get the old vocal cords going, get a few songs going, and let the ref know what I think about him a bit more freely than I might ordinarily. Brilliant. It's just great to be back on the road. Cannot wait.
Yeah, we're going to be we're going to do this podcast as the day unfolds. What are our Awayday diaries? It's been a while since we've done them, and hopefully we're going to bump into loads of people that we know at the ground and catch up with them. Last week was fantastic and emotional to be back at Vicarage Road, but hopefully we're going to. It's a different experience to go away from home, and hopefully catch up with a fair few of those. Have a catch up after the game with WD18's Jacob Culshaw. We can talk about the game of football we're about to go and see and figure out who is our new favourite Watford player. But we've still got a little bit of time to go, and of course a trip to the Amex. We've had plenty of good and plenty of bad when it comes to that ground, so we'll see which one we get today. But I'm very positive about this game, Mike. Last week, yes, it was a win, yes, it was a great performance, but it was one of those performances, as we said, we can capitalise on this and use it in the next couple of months almost. It was that good a performance, and are you looking forward to today?
I am. I'd definitely take a point. I think that would represent a brilliant start to the season. You've got to remember that Brighton had a great result away at Burnley, turned things around there, so Brighton are no mugs, as we know. But yeah, it's impossible not to come into it feeling excited and positive, really, after such a brilliant, impressive display against Aston Villa. And like you say there, Jon, if we can somehow get something out of this game, if we won it, for example, I can't help think about if we won it, that would be a huge step towards setting an amazing foundation for the rest of this season. 6 points in the bag already would be, almost unspeakably good. I look forward to listening back to this, thinking how stupid I sound when we've lost 3-0 and we're all worried again. But That's what away days are all about, isn't it? The promise and the possibility. But if we were to get something from it, great start to the season, isn't it?
And here we are outside the Amex on a lovely, not really, Saturday evening, and Watford 2-0 to the bad away at Brighton. Michael, we're joined by Jacob. Good evening, Jacob.
Good evening, John. Good evening, Mike.
Jacob, of course, from the WD18 YouTube channel.
Arno's still here as well, just.
Just.
You had a bit of a wobble, didn't you, halfway through that first half? You weren't best impressed, were you? Can you describe your mood after that second goal went in?
I was crying. Stormed off.
And what else did you do?
I took my shirt off because I was so furious. But the fact that a pro football player is giving it away like that, that's just poor.
Right, well, let's get on to that then.
Can we just end it there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The two goals, Mike, the first one, in fact, he found his space. I found trouble trying to find someone to blame who was not doing their job.
It came after pressure, didn't it? I think Brighton were the best team from the first kick-off, and I think it became very apparent very quickly they were doing to us what we did to Villa last week in terms of controlling the midfield. And I think Etebo looked a completely different player without Kushka next to him, and we looked very, very soft effectively in midfield, which meant the ball was, Brighton had time on the ball, they were composed. They weren't massively threatening, but what they were doing was using the ball intelligently, getting it out wide and asking all the questions of Watford, and it felt like they were building up a head of steam. Ultimately they got that corner. Shane Duffy, we know that Brighton are going to be a problem from set pieces and from corners. And Shane Duffy, he won the header and powered it into the top corner. I think probably he got in between. I think it was Messina and I'm not sure who else was there. Perhaps it was Loser, I think, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it was. It was Cathcart's man initially, and then he lost him, and then Kabasele and Loser were picking up the pieces, I think, if I can remember correctly.
But it had been coming, quite frankly, and what was going to be interesting then was how Watford dealt with it. And I think the answer was not particularly well, really. I think with that, without the protection of that really, really solid, combative, aggressive midfield that we saw against Villa, I felt quite badly exposed, really, in that first half. And unfortunately, we'd said it time and time again last season with Troost-Ekong. He's been great for us in a number of ways. He's obviously a great bloke. I think he's great to have around the ground. His distribution, all too often, has been appalling. And I mentioned it last year in the Championship. We got away with, I would say, probably 10 to 12 misplaced passes in the Championship. If he did it in the Premier League, would have been goals, stone cold goals. And he did it today. So I think it was cleverly short. Yeah. He cleverly got his back pocket pickpocketed. No problem for Cleverly. It wasn't his fault. It was just an absolutely abhorrent ball out. And if you're going to play out against Brighton, who press and are incredibly organised, you've got to get it right. And he didn't. And unfortunately, we knew that was coming from Troost. We know that he can do that. He did it. It was 2-0 in the blink of an eye. Brighton, good to be ahead. They deserve to be ahead. Don't get me wrong. Watford didn't settle at all, but to give it away like that is incredibly frustrating, and it will be a really good wake-up call. You cannot do that in this division. If you've done that at Brighton, who are, I could say, no disrespect to Brighton, but if you think we've got to go to Tottenham with Son and perhaps Kane. And then Liverpool, you don't need me to list the teams we've got to play.
We've been in the Premier League before, Mike, and we know the big boys and everything goes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, Jacob, for you, that first half, was there any
positives?
Well, no, not positives. Like where?
Half-time whistle was good.
Yeah, half-time whistle. It was tuneful. Half-time whistle. What is it you get from that first half, if anything, in terms of not necessarily? I don't want to say this like what was bad, but where our weaknesses are. Because it's always good to know where your weaknesses are, because then they're the things you can work on.
I echo everything Mike said, and I don't want to kind of be just licking up Mike's arse here. But look, the big thing for me today, John, was the lack of progression from midfield. I mean, goodness gracious me, the amount of stray passes, the lack of movement off the ball. I mean, that ultimately led to the second goal. And look, we can look at Troost-Ekong, but the movement in midfield was non-existent. And that's not good enough. And the best players ultimately are wanting the ball when it's going against them. And Watford didn't do that today. The midfield was pretty much non-existent. We didn't have a lot of progression through the midfield. I just think that we lacked simply a little bit of intensity, and we were out-coached, unfortunately. Look, I think Xisco Munoz showed his naivety a little bit today. When you play,
you say that, but then you say we've all said the midfield was the worst bit. no arguing from that. It was on live television. I think everyone else who knows a bit about football will say Watford's midfield was shocking. There was nothing he could do, and actually he was almost forced to play that as a midfield, especially after last week. He made one change and it was a straight swap for injury. But in the midfield, what else could he have done?
You know what? It wasn't in terms of the starting lineup, because I'll be completely honest, that was the lineup I would have gone for. So I don't have a go with him about that. I think he was a little bit slow to change the system. For me, I would have gone to a 3 at the back. We looked a lot better with a 3 at the back.
I think it's easy to do that, to make that when the game is kind of up. Where
Exactly.
it went 15 minutes to go,
Correct.
and it's kind of you're going. It started. A couple of Brighton fans very pleased with themselves, walking past saying, "Sack the manager." Fantastic work there, fellas. Really, really top draw stuff. Can you come on next week? No. I think I thought he did the right thing at half time.
Yeah.
I think Imran Loser will probably not feel great about his debut. I thought the game passed him by. I think it was a bit of a thankless task for him to come in and play the same role as Kushka did last. Kushka, whatever we're calling him. God, I miss you. Him to come in, I think we all said, anyone talking before the game said he's not that type of player, so it's going to be difficult for him to do it. But quite frankly, I thought the game passed him by a little bit, and the precious little protection in front of the defence, and precious little, as Jacob said, winning the ball and moving it forward. I think what's telling, when Watford are ticking, Ismail Assar's got paint on his boots from hugging that touchline, and very, very early on he was looking for the ball, coming deeper and deeper to try and find it to make things happen. And I think we have to give a lot of credit to Brighton. They are a very, very good side. They press. They're organised. I thought they defended magnificently. So a really good side, but what was frustrating was that we just conceded it in the first half. And I would counter Jacob's point a little bit. I thought he took Loser off at half time and brought Hernandez on, which is bold. And we had a good little spell of pressure, didn't we? And I thought we started to look. We asked a few questions, not enough evidently, but he did. And then he sort of periodically changed it up, and he did make the changes. Ultimately, then going to 3 at the back for the last hurrah. What we can see from that game is we've got a wealth of attacking options. I thought Hernandez looked bright when he came on. King looked bright when he came on. Dennis can obviously do stuff. Sarr we know all about. So we've got plenty going forward. I think it's how we protect our back four, which we've seen today again can be wobbly. The sooner I think we can get Sierralta back in. There's question marks over Ngakia at right back. He hasn't featured. It's been Craig Cathcart again, who doesn't really ever do much wrong.
Well, my favourite moment of the entire game was looking out there onto the sideline, and there's Craig Cathcart wanting to be an outlet. I never imagined ever seeing Craig Cathcart hugging the sideline.
It does make the question though. Where's Ngakia in all of this? I mean, I don't think it's a great message to send to him playing an out of position centre back at right back. I think we missed Kiko today having that support. For Sarr, as Mike says, you can't really blame Cathcart. The Northern Irish Caffrey, he's done a decent job over the last season or so.
I think you're right. I think that does pose. It tells me that they don't think Ngakia is ready.
Well, no, but is it ready, or is it that's not the system we want to play?
Well, no.
We don't want to play wing backs. Well, I don't know. That's the thing. Is he not a right back? He's more of a wing back, and they want to have that sort of defensive head. They want to have that bit more defensive thinking back four.
Yeah, potentially, but I also think if you've got an out-and-out right-back who's comfortable in that position, you play a right-back regardless of what you think of them. I think it's unfair, actually, to play Cathcart in that position unless you're desperate, let's be honest. Okay. We had the same with Mariappa. We had that whole dilemma, and he did a great job, but you shouldn't be having to play Craig Cathcart in that position. I'm not going to slate Cathcart today because he wasn't at fault for any of the goals, but that's the fact of the matter. And I think looking ahead to Spurs next week, I think Xisco Munoz has to be ruthless, and it's going to be a test for him. Does he take out Truce de Kong? Because as Mike said, that was a hospital pass today. To put Tom Cleverley under that sort of pressure was pretty much criminal. You've got to bring in Francisco Sierralta. I think we've got to be reactive now. I've got to be proactive at this point. Sierralta I'd bring into the back line.
We've got the game against Crystal Palace in the week, which is a good sort of. There's a lot of players who haven't played many games or many minutes. Even him, he can go and play 2 games in a week. We've seen him do it many times in the Championship. And there's an international break straight away afterwards.
I do want to pick up before we move on too much, though, and I think we've dug out Truce for his misplaced pass, but that was a hallmark of the entire side, really. And I think you again, I don't want to be sort of too sympathetic to the Watford performance, but the way Brighton press, you don't get any time or space. And so, but there was a number of Watford players who all too often weren't hitting their man with and they weren't long range passes. They weren't trying to pick them out from 40, 50 yards. This was passing, standard stuff that we weren't getting right. And how much of that's down to Brighton? How much of that's just down to a poor performance? But the question for me is that that centre mid area. If we didn't have we've got Chalobah and Hughes. It looks like Hughes is very much on his way out. Chalobah, not quite sure. Maybe it's a toss of a coin whether he's going to hang around. You'd think not, because
technically there were 5 centre midfielders that couldn't play today. Those 2, Gosling, Kuchka, and Ozan Tufan, who isn't quite ready and able to play for Watford. There's technically 5 who we couldn't pick from, and there definitely was no one on the bench who was going to come on and try and solidify things.
But as a supporter, that's quite difficult to take, isn't it? That you're having to see a system work so ruggedly and well last week. We probably caught Villa a bit cold. I think they probably underestimated what they were coming into, to be perfectly honest. Watford got off to a flying start and Villa never recovered. But for us, having seen that and to see us dominate in the midfield, and we know we've got the personnel in the building in various places. It's a difficult situation for a range of reasons, but it doesn't stop it being frustrating, does it? Second game in the Premier League campaign, big opportunity here to nick a point, and that is a tremendous start to the season. It really does build on last week. As it is, it's been quite a chastening afternoon and a decent reminder as to how difficult this is going to be. But it feels like a little opportunity missed for me, and there's a little niggling doubt about. That's frustrating. We shouldn't be sticking square pegs in round holes at this stage necessarily.
These changes were made. We saw more forwards on a Watford pitch than I've ever seen, or I haven't seen for a very long time.
Wasn't it 4-2-5 at the end or something? Something crazy like that.
If he had more subs, I reckon it would have been even higher up front. But what do you take from that, Jacob? Not just the next game, but sort of a longer term look at what that might look like. We were inside the front line. We were all excited about Dennis and Ismaila. They weren't getting that sort of support that they needed to do what they wanted to do. That's one possibility for the future. But the fact that you saw Culshaw coming on for more time than last week, Josh King just looked like a centre forward.
Yeah, agreed.
And the minute Deeney came on, he knew he was going to just do centre forwardy things. What do you can you see anything sort of forming in front of you for what that front line might be?
I think you made a good point about Dennis. He's actually probably one of the positives of today. I think his hassling and harrying off the ball was actually a real positive for me, because when the chips were down and we weren't playing good football, he was the only one in that front line. Maybe Sarr as well, but particularly in the spine of the team, he was really getting after the Brighton defence. In terms of how we're going to shape up it, look, we know Xisco Munoz prefers a 4-3-3. We know Sarr's going to play on the right-hand side. Then it opens up the option of who do you play down the middle. Now, I really like Emmanuel Dennis, but potentially today you needed someone against a back three who could drop a little bit deeper. João Pedro probably would have been your man. Troy Deeney could have been your man. And Josh King looked good when he came on. So I don't think it was Emmanuel Dennis's game, and that's not his fault, particularly because he's a player who likes to run in behind. So in terms of going to Spurs next week, we're going to have less of the ball again. And I think it'll be similar to that today. So potentially Xisco Munoz maybe needs to look at it and go, maybe play a Troy or a Josh King. Give us a bit more of a focal point up front. And as I said, I just want to reiterate, that's not Dennis's fault at all. I just don't think that's his sort of game. And in terms of the left-hand side, it opens up because for the first time I've seen Sema play as a central midfielder. Look, I don't know if I'm really a fan of that. As Mike says, it's
but that's another square peg. I don't know what kind of shape peg that is, but it's a Ken Sema peg. It didn't fit in that hole perfectly. Again, with the lack of options we have.
Also the dilemma with Culshaw, because I've discussed it with Sam on my channel, and we've said, is he better off the bench as an impact sub or starting him through the middle? And I liken it to Grealish with England, because everyone was saying Grealish, start him, but actually Grealish was incredibly effective off the bench. That Germany game, if you cast your mind back to it, against tired legs, Grealish played the ball through and then Kane got the header, right? So Culshaw, I almost think, has a similar effect where he can stop, start. But also, we looked at a different team when he was on the pitch. The way he draws defenders in, the movement, the ways, there's almost a little bit of an arrogance about him that he wants to try any sort of ball. It could be over the top, it could be with his left foot, his back heel is outside of the foot. He could do anything. And I think that's the thing with Culshaw. He's so bright and so innovative as well. So, look, I think potentially for Spurs next week, we're going to have less of the ball. I'd maybe look to start Josh King or Troy Deeney. I think Culshaw deserves an opportunity. Look, he's come off the bench twice and put in good performances. So at what point do you have to go, he needs to be rewarded with a start? So, look, I think Watford, as Mike said, have got a lot of talent in that attacking line.
It's a huge positive because I think the goal was offside. Josh King, I think, showing his ring rustiness, I think just delayed his pass. I'm not quite sure how offside he was. Was he miles off? He was obviously offside. But he just delayed the pass that split second too long. But it was a lovely work move. And it came off the back of Watford building up a head of steam and they were an attacking threat. Brighton did have to defend well to keep us out there, throwing their bodies in, but there was good shape, there was good movement, they were getting it wide, getting into the box, and there was lots. I thought everyone that came on from an attacking point of view did themselves good. Yeah. I think Hernandez did exactly what everyone hoped he would do coming on at half-time.
Well, no, I want him to score a goal after 48 seconds rather than 49 seconds. That's what I wanted.
A hat-trick would have been better, so if you're listening, Culshaw, come on. But I think that would have done King good. He's obviously not been fit, but to come on and feel part of the side. And whilst that goal was offside, he will have, it clicked. There was a move there that came off, unlocked the Brighton defence, and Deeney won a header, which narrowly wide. So they all showed that from an attacking point of view, we have got good players. And perhaps if we were worried about King, weren't sure where he was at, weren't sure what Hernandez is going to be like, weren't sure what Emmanuel Dennis, all players who have been hot and cold in their careers. We're only talking 2 games in, and we've effectively been not thrashed, but we've been sorted out today, really. So let's not get carried away. But on another day, we definitely nick one. And if you nick one with 75 minutes to go, 10 minutes to go, very, very different game, and we weren't out of it. So I think the way all those attacking players did themselves no harm at all.
From the Rookery End, a podcast about life following Watford FC.
So we've seen 2 games of football, Jacob, and you now, officially, because we're recording this and we'll publish this, who is your new favourite Watford player?
Ooh, that's a big question. It's a big question, John. I think it's got to be Culshaw Hernandez, isn't it? It's the blonde hair, it's the kind of confidence. The celebration, wasn't it, last week? It was almost like a statement that I've arrived. Yeah. You waited 3 years for me, here I am. No, I think it's got to be Culshaw Hernandez. But look, another player that I think potentially just kind of faded out of the game a little bit today was Peter Etebo, and I like him. I think there's potential with him against Aston Villa, where I thought quite a combative midfielder in there, technically good. He's kind of got that physique where he puts his bum into a player and you can't get around him. He's kind of a human shield. I like Peter Etebo, but I think Culshaw Hernandez is probably my favourite player at the moment. I think he's particularly the younger fans as well. There's just something about him. There's a bit of an aura. I think he's almost what we thought Peñaranda was going to be. Yeah. If I'm going to be completely honest, when Peñaranda arrived, we thought, this is the guy, the bleached hair. We saw him at the under-20 championships. We thought, this is the guy who's going to take us to the next level. But Culshaw, he's almost like an Aguero 2.0 when you watch him and his build and everything. But no, I think he's the guy to look out for this season, and I'd love to see more of him this campaign.
Yeah, you watch out for people who dye their hair blonde. It can be good. Mr. Nathaniel Chalabar knows what happens when you dye your hair wrong.
I dyed my hair blonde once. It's the last time I did anything with it.
Mike, we asked this sort of question on Twitter at Watford Podcast.
Yeah.
And what did you get from the results from that? Whether after the Villa game, what kind of vibe did you get from that?
A lot of Watford fans are really, really keen on Peter Etebo because it was just Etebo.
It sounds like Kabaddi. It sounds like you're saying Kabaddi. That's a new game.
I thought you were going to say you sound like one of those repetitive dance tracks that the youth like listening to. Etebo. A few grumbles regarding him today, and I think he was a different player, wasn't he, Sean, of his mate in there, Culshaw. So, I think he will be a good player. I think he will prove to be a vital and very, very important. Vital and very important, as if they're two different things. He's going to be
doubly, yeah.
He's going to be big for us. So, interesting to see if we ask the question again, which we may well do. Let's see if people have reassessed a little bit. I agree wholeheartedly with Jacob regarding Culshaw Hernandez.
You can't pick him, Mark. You've got to pick someone different. Who are you going to pick for your different player?
Who am I going to pick? So, I really enjoyed seeing Josh King out there. I think we've talked in pre-season about players having something to prove, and these kind of rough diamonds who have slightly gone left when they should have gone right with their careers. I think he's one of those. He's had to wait to get into the side for whatever reason, and he came on, he looked determined, and I think he looked sharp, and I think he could be one of those mean, focused strikers that gets us some goals. And Jacob talks about away at Tottenham, we're going to get less of the ball. We are going to get less opportunities in and around the final third as we play the better teams. You've got to take your chances, and I think if he hits a vein of form, he looks like he could do the business. He looks strong, his touch looked decent, he looked relatively sharp for someone who's had such a long time out of the game. So I wonder whether he might be my new favourite. So I'm going to I want to go with him, I'm actually going to go with it.
You're going to put his name on the back of your new shirt?
I'll stick it on the back of Arlo's.
Arlo, who's your new favourite Watford player?
I think King.
Yes. Josh King as well. The Parkin family are big Joshua King fans.
Attention, listeners across the galaxy, all the way from Australia to Houston. Do you have a pew problem?
If so, our friends from Manscaped have cleared you for takeoff with their 4th generation and brand new Lawnmower 4.0. Kick your nuisance hairs into the next planet with the Performance Package 4. The orbits in your pants will feel like they are in zero gravity when you use the best tools for the job from the leading male grooming. Join 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and get your rocket ready for takeoff by going to manscaped.com/EPL20 for 20% off and free shipping. That's manscaped.com/EPL20.
For a clean trinity and beyond, your balls will thank you.
Part of the Athletic Podcast Network. This is From the Rookery End.
Okay, we've made it to the M25. Well, we did stop at Cobham for a nice McDonald's. I think that's Arlo in the back, all comfortable now. He's had his chicken nuggets. Definitely better than he was after the second goal. Michael, we've been flicking through the WhatsApp group. If you don't, we talk about the WhatsApp group quite a lot. If everyone knows, it basically is me, Mike, Jason, DCW, Kieran, Geordie, and Colin. And we do talk about Watford. We talk about a lot of other really random stuff. So it's not a group you particularly want to be in. Kieran said some nice stuff. One, he seems to be ahead of us, Mike. He's sailed home already.
Yeah.
Also, he said, he hopes for Rose and Kiko next week. And he's never hidden his views on Adam Messina. Isn't quite at this level. And I think we've certainly seen that for the last couple of games. Not quite at it. Brilliant last year, but was backup for Holibas for a reason. DCW sort of picked up on that. He says, I think it will take a while for Rose to be fit. I think maybe match fit for 90 minutes. But you hope, we might see him on Tuesday against Crystal Palace. But Geordie points something out very telling, I think. No one has had to work for any of the 4 goals we've conceded this season. I suppose it's good to have such an obvious weakness because we can focus on it and fix it. Mike, it is one of those nice faults to have, and I have these weird feelings when after we lose a game. I'm sort of glad we lost the game now because it gives you wake up calls, doesn't it?
Well, I'm definitely not glad. I'm still very, very disappointed. But yeah, I think everyone's probably going to hear the phrase "back down to earth with a bump" quite a lot over the next 24, 48 hours. I think because that's what it was. I think Kieran's point on Messina, I think he has been exposed a little bit over the last couple of weeks, hasn't he? And you would ask questions as to whether he is Premier League quality. Would another side in the Premier League see Adam Messina and think I'd like him in my side? Probably not is the answer. A mistake against Villa and struggled a little bit today. I think he was probably victim of the way what was happening in front of him to a degree. I thought there wasn't much protection. But yeah, so the query there, and Geordie's point is very prescient, I think, and probably, hones in on the issue that we've all probably agreed on during the course of today, which is that the defence causes itself some issues sometimes. Towards the end against Aston Villa, things got messy. It could have given away a third penalty almost, a second penalty and a goal and an equaliser right at the end against Villa, which would have been undeserved. But they do seem to be able to tie themselves up in knots, don't they? And we've been, what's it been, 2 or 3 hours since the final whistle now, and I said, I think to you on the way up, I wonder whether the setup will be a little bit more pragmatic. Jacob after the game questioned Xisco and said, was he a bit naive in the way he approached the game? And we talked about square pegs in round holes, and having given it some thought, I wonder if we should have, whether we was a bit naive to perhaps try and replace Kuska with Loser, two completely different player, and will it be a wake-up call for Cisco? Now, there's we've talked a lot about the players this afternoon, and we've apportioned a little bit of blame here and there, which I think is fine. We're entitled to do that. And you've mentioned wake-up call, John. I wonder whether it might be a little bit of a wake-up call for Cisco as well. And it's like, right, if the players I've got to play the system I want aren't available at this level, shoehorning someone in to try and maintain the system when we haven't got the personnel available, whatever the reason that may be, is that sensible at this level? I don't know, because he might feel more comfortable with the system. They've trained with the system.
Yeah, and it takes time, I suppose, is the other big thing. It takes time, it takes games, it takes more training after that games, and lovely reflection on what happens in the games and how you're going to tweak things. But we do have another game very, very soon. It's so championship feeling, where we've got a Saturday and a game on Tuesday. There's only a few occasions it happens this time in the Premier League season. But we got this game against Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup. For me, this is a very different second round game and an opportunity for us, because Crystal Palace are, as you are aware, a Premier League level club. It doesn't feel like it's that thing where you put let's throw Sierralta in, let's throw Kiko in, because they haven't played any games. We know they're fit. Let's get them some game time. The worry will be, but what if they get injured in that game? Well, I don't think it's going to be one of those dangerous games where we're going to be going up against somebody who is, lower in the pyramid than we are, and after their big scalp, throwing in there being dangerous. So I think it is going to be a really good opportunity for them. But what do you want to see, Mike? Who do you want to see in that starting lineup to benefit this first team? Because most of the time we've seen basically anybody but the first team anywhere near a cup game. I do think this is a big opportunity. Who would you want to see shine?
First and foremost, I do think it will be interesting to see what we do defensively, because as we've discussed at length today, I don't know what the options are really in that department. So it'll be fascinating, because he will definitely he won't want to play a first 11, because we've got a massive game against Tottenham. They'll need to rest and recuperate. It was a late kick-off on Saturday. They'll be late back, so it'd be interesting to see what they do defensively. Similarly in midfield, I wonder whether...
but defensively, I think the obvious one is you've got to play Ngakia.
And Ngakia and Rose, yeah.
And not necessarily... Well, we don't know about Rose, but in Ngakia, definitely, let's put him up against a Premier League side. If that's the thing he's lacking, as Jacob said earlier on, why isn't he being picked?
Yeah.
It's not just let's play him and get some minutes. It's actually get some minutes against a Premier League side. And I think Sierralta in the centre, he needs to play as well. Just from that, he hasn't played for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. There's two other aspects to it to me. I think there's people who are yet really to kick a ball in anger for Watford. I think the key one for me is possibly Ashley Fletcher, whether he might get a start up front. We saw him today, Imran Loser. He struggled, I think, in midfield. So whether it's an opportunity for him to get some time in a yellow shirt, playing in a Watford side, playing at Vicarage Road, getting all these sort of things out of the way and under his belt, and hopefully moving him forward a little bit. But then I wonder whether this is an opportunity for the club to get players on the pitch who perhaps their future is away from Vicarage Road, because as it's...
You want Martin Navarro to play, is that what you're saying?
Well, I like, Martin Navarro is a professional footballer. I'd like to see him get game time from a professional point of view. So maybe we will see Martin Navarro. I think you're probably right, actually. Flippant comment, but I think we may well see him. But Domingos Quina, for example, linked to Bournemouth, whether that's on loan or permanent, you'd think perhaps he might get a game. And then, some of the more troublesome, and I don't mean that in their behaviour, but they're troublesome in terms of the crossroads they're at in terms of their career. And the two that really stick out for me are Andre Gray and Isaac Success, who find themselves in, on one hand, a enviable position because they're set up for life, chunky big contracts, and if they don't go anywhere, then they'll still be, made up from a professional and financial point of view. We'd all love that, but I'm sure they want to be playing football. They've got professional pride. but of course at the moment they're not playing football. They're not really in the shop window. Who is going to come in for these guys? Relatively significant wages, possibly.
But after this game today, it doesn't feel like I want to waste the opportunity to put them in the shop window when there's still work to be done with the players that we know are going to be sticking around. But so talk about those two. I've had a bit of an annoyance. I know this is a silly thing to get annoyed at Twitter, because Twitter is just a constant annoyance. Of course, remember, you can follow us at Watford Podcast on Twitter, Instagram and on Facebook. People being very quick to have a go at those boys for what they feel they have. Dismiss them. Particularly, I think, looking at their value, or not their value, what we paid for them, and thinking we paid too much, and almost putting that onto them. And I know we have had many frustrations in both those players, maybe a little bit more, maybe in different ways. Andre, because he never quite got anything really going on a regular basis, but he has played his role, he has scored his goals that did something for this club. He's part of the FA Cup semi-final winning team. And my problem, and I've sort of got to know this over the last couple of months, my problem with Andre isn't with Andre. If we'd paid half the money for him, I would have been absolutely fine with Andre Gray. We overpaid for him for whatever reasons. Isaac is a different sort of frustration. It's actually, there's that young player you wish could have done a little bit more for us, but more for himself. And seeing him blossom and seeing him move on, which has always been the Watford way, and it's most definitely also the Pozzo way for the last 10 years. And he hasn't shone. And I just don't like this sort of cheap, easy dismissing them just too quickly as the worst signing Watford have ever had. Did no one really remember Nathan Ellington?
I think it's important that we recognise the reality of how difficult it is to run a club. I think Isaac's success is a really, really fascinating case study, and I think in years to come he'll be held up almost as the poster boy of how things used to be done at Watford under the Pozzos, which is, if you get a player that you think is going to come good, you give them a good contract, and often more than once, and often without them necessarily have proving themselves. And I think that's the case with Isaac's success. He was in effect rewarded for not much with a pretty chunky contract, certainly time-wise. You'd assume the salary was good, and that to me says the reason they did that was because they saw a player there, which we all did, and they were, I suspect, nervous or wary of him hitting his straps, delivering the Isaac success they thought they'd bought, and then he had 6 months left on his contract and went for less than he'd be worth. And I think that used to be the way, that it was big contracts on the basis that some of them are going to come good and therefore we will make money on them. And that's understandable, but gets quickly forgotten when, of course, you said, John, it was interesting, I can't remember quite the phrase you used, but it's something like not doing enough for himself. I think he's obviously had injury problems, but it strikes me, and I've got no internal knowledge of this, but his attitude to me feels like he could have worked harder, been more determined, been more disciplined, and would have given himself a better chance of showing the Watford fans and us why he was signed for 12 million quid. But it is difficult, and it's, of course, once we know a player's going to leave, it's easy to sort of not care about them anymore, because when they haven't got the badge on, they're not really part of Watford, and it's on to the next. But I think it is a good opportunity with these guys, especially Andre Gray and Isaac's success. They're good case studies of just how difficult it is to get it right, and just how difficult it is for a club like Watford to get it right, who have aspirations to be established in the Premier League at some stage, and supporters have high expectations, and to do that you have to take a chance on players. We paid a lot for Andre Gray, it didn't come off, but you can understand why. He had good pedigree, he played well against Watford. Isaac's success is obviously a player We've spoken to people who have said he's a tremendous player, but we've just never seen it. And owners, directors have to take these gambles if you're gonna make moves, if you're going to be successful. And I think it's easy to forget. Nothing is certain in football, and sometimes you can end up in tricky situations. And just because it's ended up being a bit tricky, it doesn't sort of mean we can just say, well, that was a load of rubbish, terrible mistakes, hopeless, get him out. I think it's just a good opportunity to stop and think of the intricacies of how hard it is for the club, for recruitment, and for the players themselves, who find, many of whom now find themselves in limbo due to the sort of odd situation that the backdrop that football's been playing against at the moment. So, yeah, I think you're right. It's an interesting one that we don't think about enough, isn't it? What we think of our departing players, and are we too quick to sort of discard them?
You mean we shouldn't really treat these players like they're our ex-girlfriends, where we just want to say, don't like her anymore, she's rubbish, I'm just going to leave you. I didn't like you really much anyway. No, it isn't like that. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us on our journey to and from Brighton on this weekend edition of From the Rookery End. Remember, as you are a listener to From the Rookery End, you get yourself a nice little discount as a subscriber to The Athletic. All you have to do is go to theathletic.com/Rookery End, where at the moment it's a third off. But have a look at that and see if it's something that you would like to do. If you haven't done, I'm sure you can go along and just try it out for a few days. Get in there, have a look, see the stuff that Adam's writing about Watford, as well as the entire team, about all the major clubs in the Premier League, and of course across the world, because The Athletic was originally an American site. They cover all the North American sports. Baseball is coming to the end of the season. The NFL is about to start. So get yourself to theathletic.com/Rookery End to have a look. And of course, on Thursday, there'll be another From the Rookery End. This one with, of course, Adam Leventhal on our new Thursday podcast. We've done midweek podcasts for a while, but that was just because there were lots of midweek games. But we've got a podcast out every Thursday with Adam, and he's sharing the work he does and the insight he has from all the people he speaks to around the club and beyond in football. And of course, in that podcast, we will discuss that Carabao Cup second round match against Crystal Palace. Thank you very much, Mike.
No worries, John. Thank you for your company today. We'll keep the faith, I think is the phrase. Lots to learn, but there always is, isn't there?
Yeah. Thank you, Jacob, for his time. Thank you very much, Arlo.
Yeah.
Enough said. He's been in the back of the car with his iPad and his headphones on. We've had a wonderful day out with a lot of other Watford fans. And yes, it was a bad performance. Yes, the result wasn't what you wanted to. But it was just a brilliant, lovely day to be going away.
What it's all about. Never forget what it's all about. Getting out there, watching the team you love with your mates. Never forget that. Never too high, never too low.
Come on, you on!
The Athletic.